Good morning. My name is Aurelie Cormier, and welcome to the Intentional Wellness Parenting Show, where we set an intention to create healing and wellness every living day. Let me ask you, have you felt sometimes that life is just hard? Wonder if I told you that our life is actually meant for joy, fun, and good health. Of course, it doesn't just happen, but the first step to getting there is to believe that good health is possible and to envision what you would love. From there, we can choose the simple health habits that give our minds, bodies, and spirits the nourishment it needs to work well. Over 2 million people in the U.S. will be diagnosed with cancer this year. Between 600,000 and 1 million are preventable. Our genes are not our destiny, yet our epigenetics can be affected by environmental factors. Therefore, the best time to make a difference is now. So let's dive right in.
I wanted to say welcome to the show. I'm Dr. Pat, and I have the privilege and honor of doing these shows with Aurelie Cormier. That's my pronunciation of it. Of course, she'll say her name better than I could ever do it. But the idea of intentional wellness and the work that Aurelie does in helping women mostly understand that you do not have to be trapped by your genetics. You do not have to be trapped by even a diagnosis. So what can you do? Today, this is a very important conversation for you all. Women listening to this show, please take note. What every woman needs to know to prevent cervical cancer. And I just recently, Aurelie, had a friend go to the doctor, had a biopsy had to be done on the breast, but also cysts. I'm just going to say cysts. I don't want to get into their, but cysts, many of them concerning cysts, right? And not even understand what that means. Now, I'm not saying today's show will be all about that, but I am saying today's show will be all about not knowing what you're being told and not knowing the questions to ask because you're scared, because maybe you don't want to know, or because maybe you don't think there is a solution. But that's where you come in, don't you?
Yes, because one thing I know for sure, as women, we're the caretakers of the family. And we often are the mama bears, as many have called us the mama bears. We oversee the health of the entire family. And we've got to make sure we're healthy first and foremost. So we do have the energy for our family. But the other thing is we can help our children to be healthier so that they never have to go through these cancers that we see today. And dads also are much more involved today in this responsibility, but mothers are the primary ones responsible. And I want to share with you a real life story of why this is so important to me. And that is, I worked back in the 90s, I worked with a renowned GYN oncologist, Dr. James Nelson, one of the brightest, kindest, most skillful surgeons that I have ever worked with. When other doctors couldn't figure out how to take care of a patient, they'd send them to Dr. Nelson. And he did amazing things with these people. But there were people that we took care of that we weren't able to help forever. And we had one young woman in her early 30s. She was a single mom. She had a 4-year-old daughter. And at one point, she came in with a progression of her cervical cancer. And she was very confused. And it turned out she had what we call hypercalcemia. And so she had already told us she wanted to be what we call a DNR DNI. She didn't want to be coded, but she also, I knew, because she had told me, that it was very important to her that when she did die, that her daughter would be well taken care of. And she hadn't signed the papers yet for guardianship. And so I pushed really hard that we would treat her hypercalcemia so that she would, come back and be able to think clearly, make the decision who would take care of her daughter, and she would sign the papers. So we treated her. She did respond. And the good news is she was able to live. We were able to discharge her. She was able to live several more months with her daughter, was able to celebrate Mother's Day with her. and died soon thereafter.
Yeah.
And that was a very powerful experience for me because at one point I realized, oh, couldn't we just prevent these cancers in the first place?
Exactly.
Yes. And then several years later, I worked with another renowned GYN oncologist in Boston at the cervical dysplasia clinic. And she was also working with pharmaceutical companies to help develop the vaccine that we use today to prevent cervical cancers. And it just made me feel so uh, good that we now
Yeah.
have something available to help prevent these cancers in the first place.
And I want to talk to this for a minute if we could, because we go back and forth with vaccines and we go back and forth about prevention. But this is one of these things that women do not put on their radar. Oh, I need to get a checkup for this. I mean, we don't. I'm not saying you do. Those of you out there that are really more vigilant than maybe someone like myself, you do all the right things. You check all the right boxes. I am actually not addressing this question for you. But most of the time, we don't want to be aware. So it's out of sight, out of mind. The idea of the science of the vaccine is so powerful because what happens with that is this is something we're not mindful about.
Yes.
And if you're not going to be mindful about it, then you better do something else.
Yeah. No, I'm so glad that you bring that up because the Gardasil vaccine is a game changer for us. And it has the power to prevent not only cervical cancer, but other cancers as well, which I'll discuss as we go through this.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And as you had just alluded to, I just want to highlight to our listeners today that I'm going to be very frank when I talk about this. I know that it isn't an easy topic to talk about cervical cancer, vaginal cancer, vulvar cancer, genital warts, anal cancers, head and neck cancers of the tongue, the back of the throat, and the vocal cords. But these are real life issues for a significant number of people. And so it's important you are the leaders of your families. You can, you know a lot of what to do. What I want to empower you with are the resources so you can
Mhm.
keep your family as healthy as possible.
And I want to skip the break and I want to just take a moment to do an announcement during the show because we are talking about a lot of things and I want people to know how to reach out to you right now. And, Stefan, this is so important when we pull some of the aspects of this show out. This is seriously important for people to know how to connect with Aurelie. What is the best way to do that? I know you work with people and consult.
Yep.
I want to open the door for women out there that are thinking, I'm embarrassed. I don't even know the right question. Okay, none of us do, but that's what Aurelie does. What's the best way to contact you?
So the best way is to go to my website, aureliecormier.com. It should be on the Transformation Talk radio show. And just do an overview of what I have available. I have blogs, I have workshops, I have
Mm.
uh, the Transformation Talk radio program. You can listen to all our previous shows. And then books that I've published, a children's book being one of them. At the top right, there's a work with me. You click on that, answer 3 questions, and then depending upon what your need is, how I may be able to help you, just, in a short phrase, just put that in. And then there's a Calendly calendar there. You can schedule yourself for an
Mhm.
appointment with me. I'd be happy to help you.
All right. I got to get at one of the questions that's been a pet peeve of mine, and this should lead the way. So many of the commercials, so many of the things, the promos that you see say, up to 65, go get all the screenings done. But then after 65, don't bother. I mean, I'm not saying they say that, but they allude to that. I mean, would you agree? There's this subtle message that says, after 65, I don't know what they're saying. Don't pay attention. But can
Right.
you talk about that information and whether or not that's true, not true? What is the basis for all that?
Okay, so there was a lot of research done, and back in 2006, they did come up with the Gardasil vaccine. It was only for 4 of the major high-risk HPVs, because there's actually 200 different types. And of the 200 types, there's 6 and 11, which can cause genital warts. The high-risk types, of which account for 70% of all cervical cancers, are HPV 16, and the other one is 18. And then there's moderate risk types, which are 31, 33, 45, 52, and 58. And those are the ones that can cause cervical, vaginal, vulvar, anal cancer, tongue, throat cancers. And so right now, as time went on between 2006 and 2020, they were able to collect the research they needed to say, okay, these groups from 9 to 14 should be getting the Gardasil vaccine to prevent these cancers. And initially it was a 3-dose series. Now it's only a 2-dose series for that age group. From 15 to 45, they have the Gardasil vaccine that is a 3-dose series. And then after 45, they don't have any recommendations.
Exactly.
I will tell you, I am 68, and like many people in our country today, in our society, I went through the 1960s and 70s. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So in my mother's generation, maybe they only had intimate relations with one person throughout their entire life, like my mom. But for many of us today, we have many partners before we ever get married. And then when we do get married, there's a significant population that are getting divorced, getting into new relationships, getting married again, maybe in their later years. So I will tell you my own experience being in a newer relationship. I went to at 68, 67, actually, I went to my gynecologist and said, I want to prevent myself from ever having to think about any of these cervical cancers or head and neck cancers. I would like the Gardasil vaccine. Insurance didn't cover it, but I will tell you it was like $180 to $200 per shot. So times 3, that's about 600. To me, that's worth it. And it's because it hasn't been researched in that age group. So after 45, it's not necessarily recommended, but it doesn't mean it's not going to work for you. So
Exactly.
if you are over 45, you're in a new relationship, realize that every person you have intimate relations with, you have to realize they've been in intimate relations with other people, and maybe many other people. So everyone they've had relationships with, they now bring potential for whatever they've been exposed to you, and you want to protect yourself. So I wanted to protect myself, and I did the 3 vaccine series. Realize that, and this is the good news, once you get the 3-dose series, you wait 4 weeks, because make sure you're well protected up until 4 weeks after the 3rd vaccine. And then after that 4 weeks after the 3rd vaccine, you are pretty much about 100% protected from any of these cancers. Isn't that exciting?
It is exciting. And I want to make a statement to your point. Newsflash, everybody, we're going to be doing a show on this on my Unstuckable show. Divorce rates are in for January 2025, and they're through the roof. So what does that mean? Exactly what Aurelie just said. Secondarily, what they call gray divorce, meaning gray for gray hair. Whoever came up with that, it's kind of lame, but I get it, are at an all-time record, tripled. So what does that mean? Does that mean people are just going to go off and just be like, no, it's not what it means. And so what we're talking about now is there's a new level of awareness that you all need to have about what this arena is you're now stepping into, and you must do things to protect yourself. There's no question about that, Aurelie.
Right. And I don't want to present this as, oh, whenever you get in a relationship,
No,
you're going to get cervical cancer. No, And as a matter of fact, I have worked with some patients that they developed dysplasias, and within 2 years, those dysplasias were gone because their immune system was able to overcome it. But
Right.
what I am saying is you're the expert on your own body, but I want to empower you that you can protect yourself. And this is one simple way to protect yourself so you don't have to have any suffering that isn't necessary. The bad news is that there are 13 million new infections every year due to the HPV vaccine. And they have been increasing. As I said, HPV is the number one sexually transmitted infection in the United States. And in 1999, if you can absorb this, 30,000 people in the US had developed an HPV related cancer. And more recently, between 2015, 2019, 47,000 people in the US developed an HPV related cancer. It doesn't mean you're going to, but I just want to prevent you from ever having to deal with that. And I will say, probably because of the Gardasil vaccine, cervical and vaginal cancers have decreased more recently, but what has been going up are the oral and the throat cancers. So be aware of that. So this is important not only for our daughters, this is important for our sons, or important for men as well as women, because we can, men and women, I've taken care of both who have had tongue cancers, throat cancers. You do not want to go through that. It's not an easy cancer to have. And this year alone, or this last year alone, 14,000 women in the United States were diagnosed with cervical cancer, and about 4,400 died. So this is still happening in the United States. But again, the good news is if by 2020, the World Health Organization came out with a statement that there were 100 countries around the world that are deciding to vaccinate young boys and young girls in the teen years with the Gardasil vaccine to prevent them from ever getting one of these cancers. And because of that, because there are 100 countries around the world using this vaccine, we have the potential now to eradicate these cancers in this century.
Yeah. There are a lot of things that people think about when they make decisions like this orally. But I want to tell you that the thing that really scares people is the C word, the
Yeah.
word cancer.
Yep.
If there was anything in this conversation to really hold on to, that's what we're talking about. We're not at the point now in our evolution of the treatment of cancer where we've gotten to the place where we're not worried about it. It's still, especially for women, it is one of the most difficult words to hear, or even implied.
Right.
Like my friend that had multiple cysts and, the biopsy, all of that happening at one time, it's in the consciousness and the fear and the worry around that. And I
Right.
think the idea to eradicate that, to be able to look at a future where not all, but to look at a future where it's not so prevalent in our minds. It's not like in the forefront.
Right.
Why do women not get mammographies? Why don't they go get checked? They don't want to know.
Right. It's
I,
the fear that holds them
mhm,
back.
yeah,
And what I hope that people take from this is visualizing and dreaming about what you would love. What would you
yeah.
love for your life? Because breast cancer, cervical cancer, head and neck cancer, they impact on your sexuality and your ability for intimate relationships. And I have taken care of many patients with breast cancer or cervical cancer that are able, once they've completed their treatments, are able to go back to having very intimate and loving and wonderful relationships, but it isn't easy. And if we can prevent that in the first place, why not? So
Mhm.
I encourage women, dream about what you would love, and and try to live your life, as I say, with intentional wellness. So you're bringing in all those good health habits, because when we are eating well, when we're exercising, when we're using stress management, when we're in loving and supportive relationships, that helps us to have a stronger immune system, to be able to fight off some of these viruses we're exposed to and prevent ourselves from, and then using the Gardasil vaccine, preventing ourselves from getting these cancers in the first place, right?
It's, for many people, one, they don't even know about it. They don't know about the vaccine. So number one, why is that? I think we could do a lot better job in our doctor's office. I think we could do a lot better job in having these conversations. And yes, I know doctors are really tied up and strapped. That's why you do what you do, because you are the person that has the time to have a compassionate, educational, informative conversation to help people choose. See, and that's what I love about what you do. This is one piece of what you do. There are many, many, many other things you do. But I know, I can only imagine that from where you sit, how hard it must be to see so many people, because this is your area of expertise,
Right.
right? To
Yeah,
see
it's
so
hard.
many people, it's heartbreaking, isn't it?
Yep.
And now you're seeing the progress on what we could do for prevention. And that's really at the heart and soul of who you are, isn't it?
Yes. And so I've talked a lot so far about using the Gardasil vaccine to primarily prevent these cancers. But the other thing that I want to highlight that's super important too is the secondary prevention through screening. So when I worked in the cervical dysplasia clinic, we would take care of teenagers and they would have dysplasias, and we were doing treatments on them that impacted on their cervix, which impacted on their fertility. Today, we learned through research, we don't need to start screening people until age 21. So between 21 and 30, women should be getting the pap smear every 3 years. Starting at age 30, there's 3 different options that women can discuss with their doctors. One being the pap smear every 3 years until age 65. The second is to have an HPV high risk smear done alone every 5 years, or a combination of the two. So a pap smear plus the high risk HPV swab every 5 years from 30 to 65. So that if an issue does come up, it can be addressed. Women can be treated earlier rather than later. And then hopefully they won't ever have to deal with the advanced complications of cervical cancer or head and neck cancer or whatever. At 65, as long as women have had 2 consecutive negative pap smears or high risk HPV, then they don't need to continue to have a pap smear or a high risk HPV every 5 years. Well, pap smear every 3, or the high risk HPV smear every 5 years after 65. And that currently is the recommendation, although women over 65 who've been at risk, sometimes you'll see them develop these cervical cancers in later stages. So it is helpful to continue.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is this is not a one size fits all. I mean, you have to look at who you are. And this is for those of you out there, you may not know. And so this is what I recommend. I recommend you give Aurelie a call, because not only does she know the questions, she knows how to guide you through a pathway to find out what's right for you. What we're doing here is, Aurelie, you did a great job at really making certain distinctions, because I love that. You didn't come out and give us a one size fits all. You came through and you talked about different distinctions. And thank you for the update on the science on this and some of the information,
Yeah.
because that is the place we want to get to. We want to get to the place where we don't want to hear the word cancer in our life, in our charts, in what we have to live for. And I want to thank you today for that. What's your personal message? What would you like to leave us with today?
Well, as I've said, you are you are your own health advocate. You know yourself better than anyone else. And this is just to empower you to, talk to your doctor about, the HPV vaccine, the Gardasil vaccine for if you have young children starting they around 11 or 12. If as adults, that they could also talk to their doctor if they haven't received the Gardasil vaccine yet, getting the Gardasil vaccine, and then continue to use those methods of secondary screening, the pap smear, or the high risk HPV screening, so that you stay up to date and empower yourself with living your best life with intentional wellness, so that you have more chance to live a longer, healthier life and spend more time doing what you love and less time being sick. Because that's really what I love to help people do.
I love it. Aurelie Cormier. And for those of you out there, please give her a call. You don't need to know the questions. It's just a conversation, but it is also a pathway to free your mind of worry and to get some information from somebody that has dedicated her life to this. Aurelie, thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Dr. Pat. Great to see you again.
It's awesome to see you again. And yes, we need hold the space to eradicate cancer. That's what I do every day.
Yeah.
Having been affected by so many. Thank you for tuning us in, turning us on. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the Intentional Wellness Parenting Show with Aurelie Cormier and Dr. Pat, where we set an intention to create healing and wellness every living day. Tune into Transformation Talk Radio every third Tuesday of each month at 11:30 a.m. Pacific and 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more guidance and support. Beyond this, I offer workshops to focus on your good health while reducing risk of disease, especially cancer, so you can do more of what you love and spend less time being sick. What I know for sure is that this is especially beneficial for couples who are pregnant, have young children, or teens, as you will give yourself and kids the greatest chance of living a longer, healthier life. So please join us at the Intentional Wellness Parenting Show. For more information, visit AurelieCormier.com.